and it'll be loading here for just a moment. Let's see. All right, and it looks like
here we go.
We are live. How's it going, everybody? This is Jax Atlantis, and today I've got a very special guest on my channel, Domanique Blackwolf. And Domanique, would you like to tell them a little bit about yourself and kind of what's been going on with you today?
Absolutely, yeah. I just finished doing a workshop earlier today. It was a lot of fun. I had some ladies with me. I'm learning how to do it online since we are all in quarantine right now. And so what I do is I help women, and I'm now opening up to help men as well, on unlocking their primal divinity and really getting in touch with their sensuality, their sexuality in a way that's guided from their heart and guided from their higher selves, so that we can actually descend all of this energy that is talked about in Ascension into our bodies and be our highest version of ourselves in this avatar human suit that we have incarnated into. So I had a workshop earlier today. It was awesome. It was so much fun.
Sounds like it. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. How does it go?
So I teach women how to twerk 5 different ways. My background is I've been an exotic dancer or a stripper for 5 years. I'm not currently dancing, but I am currently dancing in other avenues like facilitating workshops. So I essentially teach women how to isolate different gluteus maximus muscles and maneuver their thighs and get in touch with their womb and their primal nature of their booty, so that they can really like get down with their bad selves, be a spiritual ratchet bitch, and just let it all out.
Spiritual ratchet bitch. I love that. Okay, well that's really cool. What would you say are some of the health benefits of people that are doing your workshops? Like, what are some of the things that they kind of like feel or experience normally with their bodies?
Well, there's definitely a workout aspect of fitness. I teach different booty building techniques, so there is that aspect, but it's a lot more than just a fitness class. It definitely helps women connect better to their bodies and giving themselves permission to look however they need to look, and not to necessarily be thinking about what they look like as much as how they're feeling in their body, and really bridging that gap of am I doing it right? Am I looking okay? To just feeling the embodiment and trusting that they are perfect exactly as they are. So connecting to the earth and ultimately our ancestry and divinity of being a woman.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Yeah, and in this, the words self-love they're thrown around so much these days in kind of in interesting ways. On one hand, you have people that are talking about self-love, promoting self-love. And then there's this feeling as though, some people still, sort of treat it as a very like optional thing. Like it's almost like, yeah, it'd be good to have more self-love. But, in the spiritual community specifically, what are some of the positives or even some of the negatives that you kind of see with the talk about self-love, or the way that that's, positioned or practiced to people?
Yeah, I think that it's great that self-love is becoming so trendy, and it's really good. However, I think that there's also a fakeness about it, where people promote self-love, or they will create a potential scenario to talk about loving themselves, when deep down they actually have a lot of anger or resentment about themselves that they're not actually facing. And that's where self-love and shadow work kind of go hand in hand. You have to face the ugly aspects of yourself in order to love them, or in order to love yourself deeper. So self-love, I think, is really glorified into being something that's like bubble baths and face masks and let's get a pedicure. And yes, all of those things are great. They really are. But when it comes down to it, they can be covering up and masking, or there's a lot of spiritual people that will cover up and mask under the name of self-love, when really what they need to do is face those ugly aspects and accept them, accept your imperfections. That's what self-love is.
Exactly. God, no, that's beautiful. And it's funny because, like, for me, you know, the way I love to talk about it, I mean, you know, if, say, for instance, you have an anger problem, you have like this issue where you're just really hot-headed, immediately something comes up and you get furious. Well, the common thing to do is to want, of course, the anger to go away and to judge that anger, to feel as though the anger, you know, the fact that you were angry is a problem. And what I tell people is, like, just try falling in love with your anger for a moment, like actually give love to the anger and see if, instead of having that extra layer of judgment, because you already have the issue with being really quick to anger, instead of also having judgment on top of that, like, see if you can love and accept that about yourself so that you can then channel it into something better. Because, you know, almost all the negative traits, or maybe all the negative traits, have some positive element that they can be turned into or sort of focused into. And in the spiritual community, I definitely see a lot of, you know, we had this great chat, you guys, before we did this interview a couple days ago. And we just sort of, you know, we were just introducing ourselves and talking a little bit about what we do. And, you know, in the spiritual community, spiritual bypassing is something that I'm not sure if it's something that has already crested, or if that's something that we still really need to all be talking about and bringing to the surface of seriousness. But there's a lot of people that sort of act as though negative emotions are something that you're supposed to transcend permanently, in some sort of permanent sense, through meditation, that never again will you feel anger or sadness. And the thing is, that's an expectation that no one can meet. And self-judgment is inevitable if you're chasing after that dragon. If you can love yourself, if you can feel sad and still let yourself feel happy when things are good, and vice versa, when things are really happy, still let yourself feel the sadness that you feel, you're a full human being. And to try and almost like snip away that entire side of ourselves, that shadow self, or whatever, you know, term you prefer, like, it's something that not only is it impossible, which is going to drive you nuts trying to follow that, but it's also, it removes all of the human experience from your experience as a person. And so I see that everywhere right now. I see that all over the place with emotional bypassing, spiritual bypassing. People will start a conversation with someone, they'll disagree, and then they'll just say, well, you know, we're on different journeys. And so they cut that person out, not because that person was being mean or negative, but because they just had a different point of view. They just simply disagreed with something that was said. And so I think there's a lot of that in the community, and you have had, you know, like a journey through the spiritual community in a way. And what are some of the things that you observed, whether it's related to self-love or just, you know, spiritual bypassing in general?
Yeah, I was one of those people that tried to spiritually bypass and avoid the things that bothered me about myself, and tried to sugarcoat. This is why I feel like I can come from a place of deeper understanding of the journey of loving yourself, because I was that person that was leading meditations and super spiritual. And I look back and I'm just like, oh my God, like I was on this trip of ascending back in 2012. And now I can see with clarity that so many people are caught up in that trip of my kundalini is awakened, and I am in my Merkaba body and my light body and the activation, and this doesn't apply to me because I'm in my light body, and we're going to ascend into the 12th dimension or the 5th dimension first, and da 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 da. And what it's doing is it's actually there is a necessity to get through that point of waking up. You know, you have that huge awakening and you're like, oh my God. I had a pretty big awakening in 2011 and got pregnant in 2012. And my journey really started with motherhood, with being the vessel that gave birth to the new paradigm, that gave birth to the new generation. And through that journey, I realized that I was anesthetizing through meditation. and I didn't want to feel. And so I would tap into these feelings of bliss and go to the cacao ceremonies and go to these, you know, cuddle puddles and go to Burning Man and cuddle in the pink furry couches, and it was great, and I wouldn't take any of it back. But what I've learned from it is the discernment between what is benefiting me and what is benefiting others, and what is real for me. And what I mean by that is, like, what does my soul really feel? What does my human experience really feel? And how can I just allow that feeling to bubble up and come into my experience and feel it, instead of trying to be like, oh, I don't want to feel that, I want to feel bliss. How do I skip that step?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But we're in duality.
Do you feel you're more spiritual now that you're not as spiritual?
I really kind of try and stay away from that word.
Right. But
because it's overused.
Right.
I'm more on embodiment, which I think is also a trending thing that's happening. But I think that it's part of the collective consciousness. We've gone into this, you know, in 1987, we had the harmonic convergence, and I wasn't even born yet. And then in 2012 was that, you know, Mayan end of the world, like, we're going to start the new earth and create the new earth together. And now we're here in 2020, and we're like, okay, guys, we're in these physical bodies. We're not supposed to, the ships haven't landed.
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah.
I don't consider myself super spiritual. I'm just a human on this journey, and I've learned some things, but I think humility is the biggest lesson that I've learned. In the more I know, the more I don't know.
Yeah. No, and I definitely have a complicated relationship with the word spiritual as well, because to me, spiritual is used as an adjective, and it's sort of interchangeably used as an adjective, a noun. It's being used for a lot of different things, and as if there's an inherent definition. And to me, it's like, I guess, connected. Maybe, do you feel more connected now with yourself, you know, with your spirit, or with your soul, with your physical body and with your emotions, than you did when you were in the sort of realm of, you know, being portrayed as spiritual?
Absolutely. I feel more authentic.
Yeah.
I feel more unapologetically me, and claiming the aspects of me that I used to hide from. And I think that is the golden ticket when it comes to any inner conflict that we're feeling. There's some level of not accepting either ourselves or our situation. And so when that inner conflict comes up, it's really the power of perspective, of the way that we're looking at it and how it's fitting into the narrative of our story and our subconscious. And so diving into that, I feel like, has given a deeper sense of self-awareness, so that you can respond rather than react to situations that are not comfortable, because it's about how you respond to them rather than how you just react in your emotion. Like, you're allowed to have emotion, but to observe and know where your subconscious wants to go versus what perspective you can actually view things from.
Yeah. And what's interesting is every word you just said is something that's accessible to everybody. Every single part of that is something that, whether you were a secular, whether you're deeply religious, whether you're spiritual, quote unquote, no matter what you are, you can access that by looking at yourself, truly looking at yourself. It's funny how much of life, when I look at, you know, the way that I used to view people, the way that I used to view myself, the way I used to view situations, how much projection there really is that happens instead of looking at yourself. How many times that I have felt as though I was the victim of these big bad people, when in reality it was that there's part of me that has to take ownership and say once and for all, like, you know, deep down, I'm still connecting with these people day in and day out, regardless of the treatment that I'm receiving. is there part of me that's ready to take ownership for that and say enough is enough? Enough is enough whether I walk in my own direction. Enough is enough in the form of setting boundaries, and just really looking at why it is that I have accepted some of those energies and some of those different things, and turned into resentment, and then turned into these projections, which really a lot of times are false stories. There are times when people do things that we don't like that they didn't in any way intend for it to come across that way or to be an issue in the first place. And we'll just sort of put this all on them. So yeah, I think looking at ourselves is so important. And I think that's one of the things that the collective in a really beautiful way is actually shifting in right now. I feel like there's this, it's not all about Jung. It's not all about whether it's the shadow self, the animal self, our bad side, the yang, whatever. We really at this point are starting to look at ourselves and say, you know what, rather than coming from this position that I'm perfect and that I always have the good intentions, I always am doing, trying to do the right thing, and once in a while I make mistake, but I'm always on the path of righteousness. The reality is, if we really look at our propensities for that shadow, then we can start to have actual control over them. But the avoidance of it that we think is goodness is actually like the perfect fostered environment to create more of that, badness, or whatever term you'd use. So it's it's beautiful. It's beautiful that the collective is opening up to that right now, and it feels though like it's not done. It's definitely not something that's happening overnight. It feels like we have years of this. I mean, for me, like intuitively, it feels like the shadow self as a very common access term that is used by a lot of people in sort of the universal psychology throughout the world. That's something that for the next 5 years I feel is going to be growing and growing and growing, even though this isn't a new concept. This was since the dawn of time. But as far as acceptance, because of this convergence that's happening, where all these different spiritualities, which all point to essentially this same idea of the good that is within the bad and the bad that's within the good, that it's almost like we're all getting validated in a way. We're all getting confirmation just from seeing other people's journeys. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and that, I have learned that people resonate more with stories. It's hard sometimes for people to listen to dialogue where we're talking very conceptually, and some people are able to tap into that and be like, yeah, okay, like I can get that. But I think where the golden nuggets really come from is through storytelling, and that's one of the ancient arts that our ancestors would do throughout all cultures. And so I would like to share a story with you that
Yes.
I was inspired by through hearing you talk about these different points. And this is a story about accepting my body image. So I grew up a very scrawny little girl, and I was very ashamed of being scrawny and skinny and small. And when I went through puberty, I gained a bit of weight. I wasn't overweight. I was a cheerleader. But I was the girl throwing the girls up in the air, not the one flying in the air. So I've always had really strong legs, a really poppin' booty, and I've been a very curvaceous woman most of my life. My background of my family is they're all very curvaceous women. So I created this narrative throughout my life that this is my identity. This is who I am. It's hard for me to lose weight after puberty. After I had a child, I actually got skinnier than I had ever been because through breastfeeding, she sucked everything out of me. So I was in this place after I gave birth where I was thinner than I had ever been. And I recently gotten divorced, and I started seeing a new partner, and he didn't really know that I had this issue with feeling like I was thicker, and I always wanted to be a skinny girl. So I was always striving to be this thin 20-something yoga girl that you see on these Instagrams of these perfectly bodied women with, bubble butts and perfect boobs and tiny skinny waist and small legs. And I always wanted to be that. And I would take diet pills, and I was meditating and doing yoga, you know, like I
Yeah.
was practicing a lot of spiritual ways, but I was obsessed with trying to look a certain way to please this other person, and in turn pleasing myself. So I began dancing, and I began getting really, really focused with my diet. And I got probably in the best shape of my entire life. I was stripping at a strip club 2 to 3 times a week. I was also doing manual labor during the day, during a day job, and I had a 3-year-old. And at this
Wow.
point, I was burning the candle at both ends, and I was very much in love with my partner. And what ended up happening is I would get tired, and I would look for something else to give me energy. At first, it was just espresso shots, and I was pretty addicted to caffeine. And I would have to have an espresso before I would go into my night shift at work to dance. And then I started limiting more that I would eat so that I could lose more weight. And sometimes I would have a couple of drinks when I was at work so that I could like balance all of the energies of the club. And then I would make myself throw up after work. And then I started getting offered some drugs at work. And it was that point when I started to really fall off of the wagon of I used to go in there to do my work, and I was a vessel of the goddess. And I was the stripper priestess. I would teach other girls how to meditate, and I would help them. And then what ended up happening is I myself fell from heaven, from
Yeah.
this place of I could do anything. I am the exception to the rule. I am in my God self. I am the sexiest I've ever been in my entire life. And then I got wrapped up in drugs, and I started hiding it, and I was ashamed of it. And I was ashamed that I felt like I needed it in order to do my job. And I created an eating disorder in order to look a certain way. And it was only about 4 months into that lifestyle that I came clean, and my relationship almost ended. And I had a huge, huge realization that I had fallen from heaven, that I was wasting away. And what ended up happening is I actually went, even though I got sober, I desensitized myself in allowing myself to eat again. I went out of balance in the other direction. And then I started emotionally eating. And then I started looking for this external comfort that I couldn't find. It didn't matter how many Kundalini meditations I did. It didn't matter how much yoga I did. It didn't matter how many women's circles I facilitated. And none of it mattered. What mattered was how I treated myself. And at the end of the day, I was looking for something outside of myself to fill myself up, whether it was cock or food or cocaine up my nose. And the realization of that took months to come to terms with. And what got me out of that was surfing, was getting on a board and getting in the water and being humbled, and going to a Native American ceremony as well. Both of those things humbled me to a point of seeing how minuscule I am, but how important I am in the divine web of everything. And it was through honoring my body and getting in touch with the elements, the fire, the sacred fire, the ocean, the plants, the air that we breathe. Doing breath work has helped me incredibly. But I used to be that person that reached out for anything I could outside of myself. And I was looking to fill this emptiness that I felt inside. And I know that there are so many people on the world that have that feeling. And that feeling, the only way to face that feeling is to accept it, that there is an emptiness there. And then once you accept it, it kind of starts to, it hurts really bad at first, but then you can learn how to fill it up. We're a vessel, we're a cup. And for me, it's through connecting with other people, first of all. Second of all, connecting with nature. Those two things can fill you up, and it has helped me to really just to be unapologetically me. Now I am an advocate for body positivity, and I post photos of myself that I never would have imagined doing in a million years because my ass looks so big.
Right. That's so.
But it's needed because it's real, and I'm not going to edit out the cellulite. I won't do it. I'm a woman that has curves, and yeah, I could probably, lose a couple pounds, but that's not where I am right now. And that's okay. I don't need to be trying to prove myself to somebody else. And if you're watching this and this is resonating, you don't need to prove yourself to this other person, whoever it is, whether it's your parents or your significant other or your boss. You don't need to prove yourself to them. What you need to do is to honor yourself. And if it's something that you can change, what can you do to change it? How can you take those first steps in really feeling whole, like you're the best version of the avatar that you can be? And for me, that's been physical activity and working out, and learning how to channel all of this fantastic sexual energy that I have through teaching other women how to channel it as well.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. That's like really vulnerable to put that out there. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful because there are so many people that, even if it's just fragments of that story that they've experienced too, or the whole thing, because you're not alone. There are people that have been through such similar things. It's so important that people know that not only should you not be ashamed that it happened, but that you should be proud to speak up about it and to tell your story, because that's part of your experience. That's part of who you are. That's part of what created you. All of this goodness that came out of that extremely dark experience as it was happening in such different ways. It's beautiful. And I think that, especially, you had touched on that. Now it's like there's these pictures that you're posting that you never would have before. It's the same, it's the same you. It's the same you who posted this picture, and the you that thought it was impossible. It was just separated by a little bit of time for everyone out there. Because I've been in lots of relationships, and I've seen sort of in the background or whatever, like, oh, I want to post this, but I shouldn't. And I'm just like, why not? Like, you look perfect. And the thing is, no matter how much anyone else tells you these different things, that whether it's your boyfriend saying all the perfect things and saying like, oh no, you look great, in the end of the day, it's going to be the love that you feel for yourself that will cause you to celebrate yourself and cause you to put yourself out there. And for me, like, self-love has been like a very difficult thing in my life. Like, it's something that went on a sort of a multi-stage journey, because for me, it's like, there's the action. I like how you talked about, bubble baths earlier, and like, pedicures and stuff. There's the actions of self-love, like pampering yourself. There's the intellectual understanding of it, which there's definitely a lot of intellectual understanding of it out there. Like, you should love yourself because then that shows you the template of how you love another person. But then there's the feeling of it. And that feeling is the one that I have struggled to have for so long in my life. I had, some of the action, and I had, the understanding of it, but I just was missing the feeling. And for me, it's a very recent sort of reawakening in that particular area, feeling the feeling of self-love. And it's the most powerful thing ever, because it begins to illuminate things that you think aren't connected to self-love at all. It starts to change the way you communicate with yourself, the way that you communicate with others and solve problems. It's this extra battery that you have access to. And the simple joy of things isn't just about smiling in that moment. It powers how you are in the past, present, and future. It changes the way you look at life, the way you look at people. It makes you too busy to be caught up in so much of the negative spiraling thoughts of, like, ruminating over, like, what was this person trying to say or think. If you're loving yourself, then you're too busy to worry about, the hate from outside, like, or even the love from outside and being dependent on that love from outside. So I just thought that story was amazing. I think that's beautiful. And I think so many people can relate to that and can be a part of that. If they let themselves step forward, because there's some people who go through some of these experiences and they think that they're not allowed to talk about it. Like they'll almost kind of accept it, but if they speak it, it's wrong. And, because of that, there's other people that will talk about what they've been through, and, they feel almost invited to do so now. And anyways, I think it's really great that you're doing that. It's incredible that you're doing these workshops. What do you think is tricky with the current climate? Because, even in this modern age where we're very much more open-minded than we were in the 90s. I was born in 1990, and back then, like any of, this sexual stuff would be something that was still, as censored as possible or as not very talked about. But, we're here in 2020, there's still all this, sort of judgment around stripping, around exotic dancing, around, any of these sort of areas, even the twerk shop. I mean, I don't know if you've received any negative feedback or anything like that, but how do you handle when people are passing this judgment? What do you try and say when they ask, a real question? They say, like, I personally judge that. Like, what's your take on it?
I have had studios not want to have my classes there because it doesn't fit their image. And I respect that. That's fine. They're on a certain hatha yoga level with shavasana, and they don't really want gangster rap blasting in their studio, and that's fine. But I really feel that there are multi-facets to being a embodied woman. And for me, growing up in cities, I really resonate with getting ratchet, with getting a little gangster. I went to Hollywood High School, and I was adopted. I was white girl, first of all. That was like my name. Like nobody really knew my name. My name was white girl, and I was adopted by Black girls because all the Hispanic girls, for whatever reason, they hated me. And so probably because I didn't speak Spanish. And so the Black girls took me under their wing, and they really showed me what it meant to twerk and to be initiated into that culture in a way where I was an outsider, but I was welcomed into a tribe that was not my own. And I feel that culture is really misunderstood. And it's also like rap culture has a lot of darkness to it because they've experienced, like, they were brought here as slaves. Like, they are undoing the damage of that ancestral wound. And so there's violence there, and there's anger there, and there's resentment there, and that gets channeled through their music. And those feelings resonate for me as well through my Native American ancestry. I am only a quarter Native American. I'm mostly white, but I claim that Native American heritage very proudly as well. And as a Native woman, my ancestors were oppressed. And so there's this mass oppression thing where the spiritual community, there's been a divide of like holy and pure and celibacy, and like the white tantra path of like non-penetration. And that, like, if that's your path, I support you. And like, we are all welcome to have our own paths in life. And if that is your path, I respect it. However, when somebody judges another path that is not their own, that shows me that they have not done the work of compassion and understanding.
Bingo.
And so it really takes understanding and accepting another culture, even if you don't understand it. It's like the same thing as the colonists coming here and saying that the natives practiced witchcraft, like, and burned them at the stake, for being, and the women too, and the midwives. And there's so many instances that are embedded in our society of demonizing something that is not familiar. And part of, I feel, this grand awakening is important to just have compassion and to understand. And if you don't understand, just respect it as something that, like, if you don't agree with it, that's fine. You know, I'm not trying to knock on your door and convert you into twerkology
and force you to twerk. Yeah.
No, but if you're gonna shame me and say that, you know, I'm a disgrace to my family, fuck you. Like, I have no time to deal with people that are trying to cast any shame or guilt into my life, because I hold none of that for myself. And so if I just feel like it bounces off me, like, honestly, like, I get it sometimes, but I'm like, all right, whatever, like, don't have to talk to you again.
Yeah.
Thanks for filtering out of my life.
Yeah, well, no, that, God, just in even opening that subject, like the sexual impurity, the way it has been a part of religion and the way it's re-emerging in spirituality. I'm about to film this whole show on it, not this Monday, but the next Monday. It is, I want to dig into that subject, and I would love to have you back on this show sometime soon so that we can really dig into that subject, because in short, yeah, there's a lot of judgment out there. There's a lot of judgment about sexuality. And it's interesting because through this, you know, quote unquote, spiritual path, a lot of people escaped some of the dogmatic sexual rules of religion just to recreate them back in the spiritual community again. What was, you know, impure before marriage is now negative, the harnessing of negative energy or the collection of other people's negative energies instead of the divine union of your twin flame is how it's positioned. And so, but it's the same thing. It's still a way of shaming people and saying that if you have basically sex with anyone other than this person that we are claiming is your twin flame, that, you know, then, you know, you're basically engaging with this negative energy. That's not about saying that you shouldn't have a level of responsibility about who you have sex with. It's just about, you know, looking at, like, we really need to understand that our natural sexuality is something that always will be a part of us. It always has been. And the choice to add judgment on top of it, just like when we were talking about negative emotions, for example, and, you know, maybe we shouldn't even call them negative emotions, just emotions, because, you know, just like anger with sexuality, if we add the extra layer of judgment, the only thing we're doing is psychologically torturing ourselves. It's just a
Absolutely.
form of torture that we don't have to engage in. We can be free.
Unless you're asexual, which is
Unless you're
probably
asexual.
50%.
Right.
Yeah, there's very, very few people I know. I think I've met maybe one person that is asexual that has no really sexual drive or feelings whatsoever. But it's part of being human.
Yeah.
It's like if there were no sex, there would be no you. Yeah. Unless you were a test tube baby, which is totally possible. But there would probably be no your mom or dad or grandma or great grandma. And like our primal sense of being human, and I feel like we're at a point in humanity where we've gotten through this colonized version of control and governments, and now we're wanting to reconnect with more of the tribal essence. That's why Native American things are trending right now. That's why witchy things are trending right now. People are wanting to reconnect with this ancient essence that they deeply remember, somehow embedded in their DNA, and there's some resonance there, and they want to reconnect with it because what we're doing now doesn't quite fit. It doesn't feel right. And sexuality is a huge part of what it means to be human. And, you know, I've definitely heard that if you know, picking up other people's energy, and a woman never, like, she keeps the DNA of every man that has ever entered her. And you know what, I'm there might be something to that, but can that be a negative, or can it be a positive? Can I be carrying this wisdom from my past lovers? And I was on the twin flame trip. I have to say, God bless you if you're on the twin flame journey. You're your own twin flame. I'm just going to say that right now. You are your own twin flame. Don't be trying to externalize it on someone else, because they might be the istiest and the most reflection of you. But at the end of the day, you are not half of a whole. and that terminology. That is not real. That is Disney fairy tale brainwashing BS. You are whole, holy. God. And that holy divine union of pleasure, it honestly, it helps unlock anti-aging properties. When you allow that pleasure to come through, and the oxytocin and all of the chemicals, when you do it in a very integral way, it is super healthy for you. It is very good. It's been proven in science that sex is good for you.
Yeah, like in a million different ways. And there's you can find so much research on people who have more sex, bring in more abundance in their life. They make more money. They're more, more confident, stronger immune system, just like a cardiovascular health, obviously. I mean, there's a billion things that you can connect to just being a part of that part of yourself. And instead we make it so much about, there's like an objective connected to sex, like, trying to secure a like sexual resource in a way when it comes to our partners. And so that's why, I mean, there's people who stay with people that they don't even want to be with anymore, because there's this level of kind of comfort and this level of sort of like, it's almost like a false stability paradigm where it's almost like you're objectifying someone, but not because of their body, but because they're still there, And so, it's there's so much of that energy out in the collective, and it's exciting to have these conversations and conversations like this, because the more we talk about it, the more we all find our own way. Because I certainly don't claim to be any kind of pillar of wisdom or genius, and I don't think that you do either. Just we're two people having an experience and going through life, and sort of finding through these experiences our own sort of wisdom just by living it, and just by questioning some of these things. So when you see a Facebook post out there, watching this, where there's a guy and it shows all of his past female lovers sort of connected to him while he's trying to start this family with this woman, and you think like, oh man, like, have I done something wrong? Like, should I feel guilty for bringing all of them with me? It's like, you have to question if it's right or wrong. I like that you brought that point up, as far as, is that a bad thing, first of all? But second of all, to what degree is that measured? To what degree are these experiences that shaped his character part of it as well? Because sex isn't just sex. Sex doesn't just touch sex. Sex touches our psychology, it touches our mind, it touches the way that we form these relationships with these people. And so what you've learned from one person changes the way you are with other people. If all of us were just these, quote unquote perfect virgins, and then we got together and got married the first time, and then that was it for the rest of our lives, and we were with that person forever, there'd be a lot of very unhappy marriages out there. And yeah, maybe there would be more marriages, but they'd be very unhappy. And so I think it's important for us to be who we really are, whatever that means, whether that's a nun, whether it's celibacy, or whether it's, being more open, but just being who you really are and being honest about it, because it's not going to change it to judge it,
Yeah, all paths are sacred and all paths are holy. And whether that is the path of celibacy, or the path of monogamy, or the path of polyamory, or any of it, what's important is that you are honoring and pleasing yourself. And the art of pleasure goes beyond the bedroom. It's in your day-to-day experiences. It's adorning your surroundings. It's as mundane as cleaning your room or doing the dishes. It's as elaborate as creating a ritual for yourself to do, to whether it's ending a certain thing or beginning another thing, or cultivating and growing a business or a project. Everything can come from that genius part of us, which is our reproductive system, which is our second chakra of creativity, and to create and to please ourselves. But when it's turned around and trying to please others, we will never feel satisfied. We will always hunger for more. But
That's
when we
beautiful.
just please ourselves, that's it's an art. And so that's what I am here to help people learn to do. And I've just recently opened up and began taking on men as clients. I've only been seeing women as clients for the past 5 years. And it really started when I was dancing and I started teaching women how to meditate, and I was doing women's circles and I was bridging that gap. And I've still continued to do women's circles and I do my workshops, and I definitely feel like I have a gift for women. But it has become clear to me that the men are looking to really honor the feminine in them and to balance out the ability to receive, the ability to do acts of pleasure. And yeah, so I have now begun opening my doors to men, and I'm offering one-on-one sessions with people where they can really, we can work together so that they can build a life of pleasure for themselves while accomplishing their goals. I don't claim to be a coach. I don't claim to be a therapist or help you with any of those sectors of the mind. What I am here to do is to help you tap into your center of pleasure and the deep creator sense of being a creator in this life, and being an ally for you in making it happen in the world while enjoying it, what you're meant to bring into the world. So I like just today decided that I'm going to start taking on men as well for my one-on-one clients, and I'm accepting only 5 new clients right
Wow.
now.
So you've got 5 spots. So any guys watching this right now on Facebook or YouTube, make sure to check it out. And so we're actually out of time here, but I have had such an amazing time having you on today. I have your Instagram link in the description. So anyone that wants to find you can definitely go there on Instagram. They can maybe find you on Facebook as well. Do you have any basically projects that you're working on right now? I guess, that's one of the things you're working on is, you're taking on male clients as well for these sessions. Do you have any last things you'd like to say to the collective, or about where they can find your upcoming work or any upcoming projects or events?
Yeah, I do most of my updates through Facebook and Instagram, and post my offerings there. I'm doing workshops at donation basis every Thursday at 10 a.m. And those are going to be through Zoom. I am in the process of creating a workshop that you'll be able to download very soon. I am also a Native American flute player, which we didn't really touch on, but I am in the process of recording my album as well. So if you're interested in Native American flute music, I will have some flute tracks that will be available. And yeah, I think that about covers it. And I look forward to just hanging out with you again, Jax. You are so awesome. Thank you for your show and for all that you bring to the world, your wisdom and your humility with that as well, and for organizing this.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you guys so much for tuning in today. It's been incredible having you on today, and I will talk to you all very soon.